Hello and welcome to this presentation on Prisms, or Primary Source Materials and Scholarship. My name is Alexander Huber and I'm one of the creators of Prisms. Prisms is at www.prisms.digital and you're very welcome to visit the website, which is currently in public beta. Prisms is a resource designed to facilitate the semantic annotation of primary sources in their material, digital, and scholarly contexts. To this end, Prisms offers a publication platform for digital scholarly editions, as well as a set of tools designed to contextualize these editions. Firstly, our motivation. Prisms is rooted in digital textual scholarship. It conceptualizes digital texts as the result of remediation processes that place them in a continuum rather than outside of the historicity and materiality of the sources they organize and present. Digital extends this continuum in ways that enable new forms of access, engagement, and analysis. The scholarship, both print and digital, that underpins each digital edition provides the essential context for these remediation processes, and collectively they sustain the knowledge network that supports all scholarly engagement with the texts from any disciplinary viewpoint. Prisms is designed to allow for the collaborative and collective modeling of this continuum of digital texts and scholarship by placing digital editions, the material basis, and the resulting academic engagement in a linked context, building on the standards and tools provided by the semantic web. This is of course not a new idea. Practitioners in media studies, digital book history, and of course the digital humanities themselves have been arguing for some time for a holistic approach to the digital representation of primary sources, which shapes more than we maybe want to admit our scholarly engagement with these texts. What we are hoping to contribute with Prisms is both an infrastructure and a set of tools that empowers practitioners to perform this work in a way that encourages collaboration and ensures the interoperability, longevity, and usefulness of the performed modeling as both human-readable and machine-processable. Prisms currently hosts digital editions from several sources and will continue to add new editions, with priority given to collections that have been retired from active development and hosting to sustainability or preservation platforms. The collections themselves, with preference for editions encoded in TEI, the Guidelines of the Text Encoding Initiative, display a huge variety of approaches to scholarly editing, with some consciously more production and reuse-oriented, and others more intensely scholarly. An example of the former might be the full-text collections created by the Text Creation Partnership. An example of the latter might be the texts on the Taylor Editions website, which are produced in the context of a History of the Book course at Oxford University. So how did we approach and implement this? As I mentioned, Prisms embraces linked data standards and a modeling approach that is ontologically underpinned. The ontologies used in Prisms come from the established and well-documented CDOC-CRM family of ontologies, particularly the core and further models, supplemented by argumentation, provenance, and digital extension ontologies. At the point of ingest into Prisms, we run a suite of semi-automatic tools, part sanity checking, part providing basic reconciliation between existing and new records based on available identifiers, part metadata mapping of the edition's components to CDOC-CRM. Such components might be a group of manuscript witnesses, early print versions, critical apparatus, facsimiles, and so on. The result of this process is, in a nutshell, a Ferberized view of the digital edition, as you can see it here. Internally, this view is represented in JSON-LD, which is the format we use for all communication and exchange processes within Prisms, as well as for the graph display and the modeling interface we will see in a moment. You can explore this view by simply hovering over any of the nodes which will display their properties, or by browsing the tabular view provided for each node on the right-hand side of the screen. So bringing these collections together has resulted in a graph of about 14 million RDF triples, with roughly 70,000 texts, 40,000 authors, publishers, printers, booksellers, and so on as the most common classes. The triples are stored in the widely used RDF-native BlazeGraph database, which also underpins, for example, the Wikidata query service. In Prisms, you can not only work with the tens of thousands of texts already included on the platform, but you can of course also add your own digital editions to Prisms. We provide a free online training course that takes you through the entire process of creating a digital edition, from selecting a text right through to publication, with the benefit of cross-searchability and discoverability of your edition alongside this ever-expanding curated corpus of digital primary sources. If that sounds a bit daunting, there is also a way to get started right within Prisms. I mentioned that we envision practitioners as the primary user group with a vested interest in modeling their resources. This frequently starts at the early stages of any editorial project, when source materials in manuscript or print need to be brought into the system and related among each other and externally. In Prisms, this step involves creating an editions record for the text you want to include and then populating it with available or newly created components. The Prisms Workbench is the central area of engagement with the texts, and here we can work with one or more components of one or more of the editions assembled. The Workbench allows us to look at an edition in two interfaces. One is a view of the composite objects that in aggregate constitute the edition, the other the knowledge graph that contextualizes these objects. Firstly, the Workbench view of the constituent objects. Each component is displayed in its own window and can be flexibly arranged on the Workbench to suit the particular task at hand. Each component comes with detailed metadata and a small suite of object-type-specific tools, such as the ability to add notes to both the texts and facsimiles, identify named entities, and create connections within and across editions. Visualization options currently include Voyant tools, and we will be working on adding more tools as and when we receive feedback throughout the beta phase. All contributions made to Prisms are stored in standard formats, such as the W3C web annotation data model for notes and connections, and are serialized as JSON-LD. These tools are all intended to facilitate the overall contextualization work we have talked about for both the components of the edition and the graph that connects these editions among themselves and externally. The second view of this contextualization work is the graph view. Just like with the components view, all interactions with the graph are recorded in a user-specific named graph directly in the graph database. The updates are done via Sparkle Update, and internally we use Turtle for constructing updates and additions, primarily because of its readability and ease of use. For the graph visualization and modeling interface, we currently use Cytoscape.js. This view should already look somewhat familiar from the graph preview we saw at the beginning of the talk. The main difference here is the red dot that follows you around as you traverse the graph. It is a visual cue that is repeated here from the component view to indicate the purpose of creating connections. The view will hopefully feel somewhat familiar to anyone who has worked with CDOC CRM already. We have found the CDOC ontologies a good fit for the modeling exercise we want to encourage with Prisms. As an event-based ontology, CDOC CRM is conducive to the types of historical analysis we engage in as editors and literary scholars. CRM offers hundreds of classes and properties, and although not specifically designed with our application in mind, it is flexible and extensible enough to serve as a starting point for modeling textual history, analysis, and scholarly argumentation more generally. With its many extension ontologies, it also caters for describing archival and library resources, provenance, and material aspects. It thus offers a feasible way of modeling scholarly discourse in the literary domain and knowledge representation more generally. So to conclude, what are the next steps for Prisms? As I've already mentioned at the beginning of the talk, Prisms is currently in public beta and will remain so at least until the end of this year. The purpose of the beta phase is primarily to help us learn about the possibilities and limitations of Prisms as a research tool in the wild. We encourage you to explore and would be grateful for any feedback, positive or negative, you may have. And just before I stop, I just wanted to acknowledge a whole host of standards and fabulous free and open source tools we've been able to take advantage of in Prisms. To them and to you all for your attention, thank you.